prompt questions for you too, and it might give you places where you can say, oh, okay, let me ask specifically about this or that. So I'm a psych major, and then went to law school in Richmond. And because I liked psych so much, I found out that there was a dual degree program with a master's in social work. So I did those two things kind of together in concert, and then made a decision in part because of salary and earning potential generally, not just where you started, but over time, and burnout, because social work is really emotionally taxing. Decided that I would stick with law. And so I started at a firm, like a mid-sized firm here, and that was a firm that had about 50 attorneys. So if you like want to compare that to a mid-sized company, right, because it's 50 attorneys, about 100 staff members, so, you know, pretty decent sized company where things were very structured, formal evaluations, formal budgeting, like very, very structured. Then left that firm and went to work for the federal government, even more structured. You have a grade and a class for your position, and depending on your experience level, you kind of just get stuck there, right? And you don't have bonuses, you don't have that kind of thing. And then left there and went to where I currently am, which is a small firm, so there are 4 attorneys and about 4 or 5 staff members. So much less structure. Much more flexibility and fluidity about how we do things, from salary to other types of compensation, which I've alluded to, and a lot more movement. So if we need to change something, it's a lot easier to change. So the reason I say that specifically is that part of what you need to be thinking about when you're applying to these different positions is what kind of environment are you applying into. Because there are going to be some, like with the GA stuff, that it just is what it is. That was decided 3 years ago, and for a lot of graduate schools, that's exactly how it is. Like they've set a budget 3 years in advance. So is that what you're walking into, or are you walking into a situation that has much more fluidity? And so I think about it, of course, from your own personal needs, but also be thinking about the environment that you're dealing with, because a lot of times it's not that they don't want to do what you want them to do in terms of pay or otherwise, but they might have restrictions that are keeping them from having that flexibility too. So kind of along those same lines, I think that it's, and Allie, I kind of sense this, that you felt like you got the raw end of the deal, like maybe there was some foul play and there was some bad intent and these people kind of did this to you intentionally. And maybe they did. I don't know the whole situation. Maybe they did. But maybe they didn't.
Yeah. They did it because they know I'm a girl and I'm a pushover, apparently. So they did it because I did it last summer, and so they thought I would just do it again this summer.
Oh, that touches on 2 great things I want to talk about. So don't let me forget to talk about expectations and how we create expectations for people as much as they're imposed on us. And also about this really difficult place that we find ourselves in as women. Not just in the workplace either, by the way. I mean, this is going to be in your relationships. It's going to be everywhere. And it's what I will affectionately refer to as the witch versus wallflower problem. And it's really hard, because are you going to be the nice kind of pushover, or are you going to be the witch? And that is really hard, and there's a place and time probably for both extremes, but more times than not, it's managing that gray space in between them. So maybe I could kind of open it a little bit by saying, do any of you feel like you tend to fall closer to one end than the other? Okay, so how, just by show of hands, who tends to fall closer to the wallflower side, like the pushover side of things? Okay, and who tends to fall further to the witch side? Okay, and then Haley, you're kind of in between.
Yeah, I know I come across as a wallflower to a lot of people, but like the very nice and shy person, but I definitely utilize the witch a lot.
Okay.
So.
Well, so for those of you who said that you tend to be more of a witch, what problems have you run into with that so far?
People shut down
Okay.
immediately.
And are you able?
Oh, name calling is another one. I don't know if
You're a name call or people
No,
name call
people
you?
name call
Oh,
me.
okay.
I'm like, you haven't gotten that?
I mean, I did when I was a kid, but I mean,
I
most
get it
people
from
don't
adults.
do that now. Wow.
Mm.
I've gotten it from adults.
Yeah, so, and I have to ask Sabrina sometimes because I forget like what y'all read or you don't read and that sort of thing, but do they talk about the adaptive pattern in terms of like how you can kill yourself off and that?
Yeah.
Okay.
They should, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, and so that's a risk that we have, right? I mean, let me give you an example. I know someone, and I won't name them. It's actually not me, it's a friend. No, okay. But I do know someone who had a great offer in the medical field. And one of her, and it's important that's a her, one of her demands was that she wanted a half day off because that was something she had in a previous position within the same company. Okay. She was dealing with several levels of people on the other end of this organization. One was the person she would immediately be working for, but because the organization was big, there was also an HR department, and so she also was dealing with the HR person. The immediate person she was dealing with was a man. The HR lead was a woman. She made this demand, and I mean, I think kind of appropriately framed it. You know, I don't think that she was terribly witchy about it. But she was pretty clear that that was something that she needed. She had an offer for this position. They withdrew it. Yeah, they withdrew it. It wasn't a no, we can't do this for you. It was offer withdrawn. Just guess which person was the one who withdrew it.
Her supervisor.
Supervisor?
HR.
Yeah, I think.
HR.
So you're like split halfway. It was the HR. So it was the woman.
Actually, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah,
Just
so,
because it's HR.
well, and when I say who made the decision, I don't mean like who relayed it to her. I mean like who was the person who said no, too many demands. And the reason I tell you that is because I think it's kind of easy to think that if we're too aggressive or too assertive, if there's such thing as too assertive, but that we tend to think or be more on high alert for it when we're dealing with men. But it's just as much of an issue, if not more, depending on who you're dealing with women. So, again, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's easy to kind of forget that. Because, you know, we talk all the time about like men versus women and all that, but it kind of happens just as often the other way. And I can say I've seen that in my own experience as well, where you think that because you have, another woman that you're dealing with on a situation, that there's something you can sort of assume, because you have a shared experience and that kind of thing, but that's definitely not true. So kind of be on the lookout there too. If we kind of take it to the other side, for those of you who tend to be more pushovers in situations, what problems have you encountered? Now, obviously, you literally got paid less than you should have, so that obviously branches out to every other aspect of your life, because then what can you afford and what choices and freedom do you have beyond that? But what other things have you all run into?
Just people expecting a lot from you, and they don't seem to mind that they're giving you a lot, but they're not considering that you've already have a lot of stuff on your plate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you kind of build to a breaking point, which it sounds like Allie kind of hit hers. And what is there in between that? So, like, we can use Allie's situation since she shared it. What's in between you realize that this is not fair to you and quitting? Like, are there conversations in there?
I mean, I had a conversation with my direct manager who then didn't in turn tell the department manager about the situation. And so he just thought I was just not coming back for the summer. But really I had talked to her anyways. But I did have a conversation and I tried to explain to her that if there was a job posted and I was doing the job for only $8.75 instead of $10, like it wasn't fair to me. And she said, I understand that, but I can't do anything about it. So.
And was that, just for my timeline purposes, was that after the summer that you had worked that way?
I worked all
Okay.
summer and then through the fall, and I had the discussion in the spring. So.
Okay. So, and this is to anyone, talk to me about your intuition about how expectations exist in the world.
And there are some people that will always expect too much of anybody, regardless of who they are or what their abilities may be. And then there will always be some people that don't necessarily expect really anything out of you and then are always pleasantly surprised by what you do or do not do. And then most people fall somewhere in the middle. But I mean, I've had both ends. I've definitely had people that had far too many expectations of everybody that they managed, regardless of who they were, what their experience was, what they were supposed to be doing.
Okay. And other observations there?
Once you do something, it's expected that you do it over and over and over again. Like if you make a certain decision, that'll be your decision every time. Or once you take a job offer and you work at a certain pay, they're going to expect you to be working that same pay over and over and over again and won't say anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think the difference, and there's always nuance and there's always variability, but the difference between what Aubrey is saying and what Isabella is saying is really important, because Aubrey's making she's kind of coming at it from the theoretical framework of expectations being imposed on us. What are other people expecting? But every interaction is fluid. Right, so if you're, let me just give you another example.
Yeah.
We're sitting here live in person talking or whatever. I can see you nod, I can see you shake your head, I can hear like a, like that. It's a very much a mediated conversation, and that's helping me understand where we are in the conversation. I maybe like 6 months ago or so, I did this talk where I was literally looking into the camera. It had no feedback, and it felt terrible. Like I was pretty sure I had bombed the whole thing because there was zero feedback. And so every interaction is like that. And so yes, there are going to be, to some extent, like we kind of walk in with our default expectations of people, and I'm sure y'all have gone like way back into your childhoods with Sabrina about that kind of thing. But we've got some default expectations that we bring into the situation. But as soon as an interaction starts with someone, we are helping shape the expectations from that point forward. So in Allie's situation, not to pick on you, but since you put it out there for us, clearly she told them that was okay. And maybe let's talk about where you were coming from. Maybe did you think, well, they'll just, maybe this is the nice thing for me to do for now, and they'll fix it. They'll see that I'm valuable and they'll do all these things, and so they'll just make it right on their own.
Well, it started out as it was just going to be for a couple of weeks. I was just going to do it for a couple of weeks, and then
which was very nice of you.
I was like, okay, fine, it's fine. And then at the first few weeks, I didn't realize about the pay difference until I saw it posted on the website, and I was like, oh, okay. And so then I said something, and they never did anything. I was like, well, I can't quit, and I didn't want to upset anybody.
You can't quit.
Yeah, I mean, I could have.
Yeah, I mean, and so that's another thing, right? To Brittany's point, like this feeling that people will ask more and more of you without recognizing the cost that it imposes on you. Let me say, I think when I was younger, I gave people too much credit for paying attention. And in particular, I think I lacked perspective about what was going on for other people. so I would get so frustrated if, let's say, I had done an assignment or was working on a case for a partner, and I went to them and I wanted to just jump right into a conversation about that case because that's all I've been thinking about for 3 days. Okay? And I walk in and I don't give any introduction to it. I'm just like, yeah, so this thing, and I just jump right into it, and they just look at me like they have no idea what I'm talking about. They didn't even know that they'd asked me to do the thing that I'm talking about. And I thought, that's so crazy. Like, how do they not know that they've asked me to do this thing that's just occupied 36 hours? Or whatever the working time was for that. So, and I remember thinking, they're senile, what's wrong with them? And then fast forward a few children later, a much heavier caseload of my own, trying to run a law firm administratively, all those things. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm not sure what I asked someone to do a couple of days ago. And so now I'm on the exact opposite end where someone comes in and they say, they don't give me any introduction. And they just say, blah, like they throw it at me. And my mind is on this thing that I'm working on at that moment. And then first of all, they interrupt me, right, from focusing on this thing. And then they say this thing that I don't have context for. How do you, what's my reaction to that? How do you think I feel in that moment?
Confused?
Yeah, confused. I'm irritated. Because it's like, I don't even know what you're talking about, and you just interrupted my time, and my time is valuable. Don't know if you know this, I don't have enough of it, right? Which is the same thing you feel when you go to someone and you're trying to get them to pay attention to this thing you've been paying attention to. So, in other words, we think that there's this other thing going on, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying, like maybe they did it on purpose, maybe they didn't. It's like a left-hand, right-hand problem, depending upon the structure of your organization. They may literally have no idea that they weren't paying you what they've just posted a job for. So just think on that. Just think on that, because I think that when you go into a conversation to negotiate something or to address a conflict, which is not as much what we're here about today, but just keep in mind that if you can give them the charity, if you can have a charitable interpretation of what's happened, you probably are going to have a leg up in the conversation with them, rather than assuming or rushing to judgment that they've done something intentional or in bad faith, that kind of thing. So I want to talk just a little bit more about being in between place, because that's going to make a really big difference in how you negotiate like salaries and job offers and things. Where is your usual first contact with a job offer?
Online with your resume?
Yeah. And for certain positions with a cover letter, right? So you set the tone there. And there are certain words, like you can Google this and you'll find lists, that women tend to use more, like certain introductory phrases. How many emails have you written where you say, before I propose it, let me just ask you, if you need to write a professor about a reading or homework or checking in about something, and you say, Dear Dr. Sherman Cook, what's your first line of the email?
I usually say, I hope this email finds you well. Like, I hope you're doing okay.
Okay. And then what?
I was looking at the syllabus and I had some questions about what was due or something.
Okay.
Yeah. I very rarely do I say, I'm sorry to bother you, blah, blah, blah. I try not to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I feel like I'm actually trying, almost inconveniencing someone, then I'll apologize.
Okay.
So I sent a sorry email. For the application I applied to, I clicked, don't contact references yet, and they did, and I hadn't gotten a chance to, ask them first before I approved it, and I apologize for that, because I have to let people know, but I usually try not to say sorry.
Yes, so perfect example. Don't want to bother you, sorry about this. I was just writing to see if
I do that.
I've
do
done
that
that.
Every
constantly.
time.
I was just waiting to see. Jesus.
I've done that.
But think about it. What is that? Like, first of all, emails are overused. Okay, so you maybe you don't get it. I don't know, because like I've more and more, Aubrey and I recognize a generational difference. So some of this may be that. But I can tell you, if you're dealing with someone who's older and you're having like input from 15 places all day long, the more words that are in an email, the less attention I pay to it. The shorter and more concise it is, okay, you've got my attention. I will read that all the way through. And I will read it carefully, because it's just easier. Like, it doesn't take as much of my bandwidth.
Yeah, I've noticed the formality difference. Like, I don't know, like, I personally see email, like, especially to people that are older or like higher up hierarchically to me, is like a formal thing. And so like I try so hard to be like some semblance of formal, and then they send me back like a 2-word response like, okay, you're good. And I'm like
sent from my iPhone, like,
yes. I'm
have
like, there's obviously a difference here in how we're treated. But like, you know, you're trying to be so formal, and then they're not.
Okay, see.
Try to be utterly polite. Like, especially if it's the first time I've contacted them. Like, if I don't know them that well, I'll be like, I'll kind of be, dancing around.
That's a great phrase, because that's what it feels like when I'm reading it. It's like, just get to the point. What did you write about? And like, use your subject line. Like, here's, and these are like so practical and like technical things. It's not like higher order meta thinking about it, but it totally drives me nuts when I get an email that has no subject, or the subject is, hey.
It's just spam.
Yeah,
That's nothing.
So an informative subject line is actually really helpful, because it's like, oh, okay, that got my attention. I'll pay attention to this. But yeah, so and I think that's right though, that you know, to be cognizant of who you're writing to, that's going to affect your formality. And in the world I live in, like, everything that's written is possibly evidence. So, you know, I'm very aware of that in my communications. You know, most 95% of text messages I send are complete sentences. That's not a joke. So, yeah, so certainly be aware of it, but get to the point. So, like what Danny was saying about just being specific and not using those extra phrases. And it's hard for me because I tend to do it. And when I think about it, like when I've sat back, I'm like, when do I do that? I tend to do it with men. Yeah, I do. Like more, and generally older men. Like if it's someone around my age, I don't notice it as much. But I'll go back and look, like, I'm just writing you to see if. No. Where are the answers that were due 3 weeks ago? Just get to it. And so the reason I got down this rabbit hole is the language that you use in your resume and cover letter will kind of telepath that. Like, it will be noticeable to people. So, and I wish, let me just throw this out. I forget what time exactly the class is tomorrow. Is at 1? Right? 1? Okay. I tried really hard to get my husband to come today, because he has some recent experience with resume cover letters, job changes, like structural changes with an organization, and he's surprisingly adept at managing all that, and he says things just, you know, off the cuff. I'm like, oh my God, that was brilliant. Where'd that come from? But he's coming tomorrow, so you probably have other classes and things going on, but
I'll tape it and post it to the internal mail site.
Okay, great. Because I think he has a lot of helpful things to add there from a very different perspective, because number one, he's in a technical field. He's with the power company. So it gets us away from kind of the touchy-feely kind of stuff. Not that anything's wrong with it, because I love that stuff. But just it gives you a different idea. It's supremely male-dominated. And he's just very savvy. So, on your resume and cover letter, let me suggest this. you know that you need a different cover letter for different positions, obviously. You may need a different resume for different positions. So this is one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever heard from him, but also that he's given to many people that he works with. When you, and there's so much available to you online now, when you're applying for a position, go through the company's website. Usually there's a place on there that talks about their mission statement, their value statement, their values. Find that, and you will see certain adjectives and certain nouns repeated over and over. And those are things that culturally are important to that organization. And if you can find a way to take what is already in your resume and highlight those things, and same thing with your cover letters, to highlight how your experiences and your education, et cetera, how that fits into that culture. You're not saying, hey, I saw on your website that your culture includes these 4 elements. I have these 4 elements. But what you're saying is, here's my experience that highlights that. And use the word, just use the word. Like safety is a big one for the power industry. Bless you. And so integrate that. Like safety is important to me because this, because people will notice that. It's kind of like if you think about what is unique to your Collins experience. What is unique? Just throw out some words. What's unique? Why did you choose Hollins?
Small.
Okay.
Why I chose Hollins, personal. Yeah, personal.
Okay.
Academically flexible.
Okay. All right. Now put yourself on the admissions committee, and you get 3 cover letters that accompany an application, or 3 essays. And one says, I really want to be at a big school with a lot of academic rigidity. Okay. One says, I want to go to college.
That's the one.
Okay. And the third one says, I want an intimate community where I can be deliberate and thoughtful about the classes that I take and arrange a schedule that gives me the best academic benefit. Who do you want of those 3 people? Well, the one's out easy, right? Like they want the big school. This is not a big school. That doesn't make sense. It's not a good fit. But the middle one, until you have the comparison, the middle one doesn't sound bad. They want to go to college. They want a job. They want a graduate position, right? Like, have you seen, and if you've written one of these, you don't have to admit it, but have you seen on a resume where it'll have some people will put the objective and they're like, to obtain a job? Oh no, shit, that's what there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not tailored. And then you get to the third one where someone hits all the keywords, and oh, that feels right. And that's their first introduction to you. And you can do the same thing with work experience too. Like if you can tell that it's important to them that they have someone with experience in a library and a particular kind of experience, then get that out there as quickly as you can. All right, you want to talk about salary negotiation? And you kind of have to remind me, I guess maybe Danny was the one who had a very specific situation. Does anyone else have another specific situation they're dealing with where you're at the point that you need to actually talk dollars? No? Okay. So before talking about anything super specific, let's just acknowledge that whatever, and I think this probably is true to a T, whatever you think that you should ask for, you should probably ask for more than that. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that we are, whether we like it or not, socialized to believe that we deserve less. We don't think about it that way. You know, we actually think that the reasonable number that we come to is the reasonable number. But we need to recognize that we have a bias there. And so whatever your intuitive response is about what you should make, you're going to have to adjust that upward. Another big reason is that women typically are going to be less aggressive about negotiating, and employers will think that. Like, they'll come into it. I mean, look, it kind of sucks, but there are generalizations and stereotypes because there's some truth in it. Like, it came from somewhere. And it's not true for everyone, but that's the way we categorize the world, right? Is it a dolphin or a fish? Is it a whale or a dolphin? Is it a salmon or a tilapia? You know, like, we have to, that's the way we organize our world, like it or not. So they're coming into it thinking something. And until you give them a reason to think differently, and they have to say, oh, wait, this isn't a normal dolphin. You know, this one swims sideways or whatever. You know, until they know that, they're just going to keep on with the dolphin thing, right? They're going to keep you in that channel. So they're going to come into a negotiation thinking that they can go down from what you've said more than if they were dealing with a man. Just that, as these are generalities, right?
What if, like, in my scenario, like, the directors of this camp, it's like a women's camp, so it's all women. So most times when I've negotiated salary, it's been with a man, but oddly enough, the time that I negotiated salary with a woman, she was less likely to give me what I wanted. So I don't know, coming in, if this is going to be the same case.
Yeah.
So that's kind of hard to prepare for, because my expectations of that kind of were flopped.
Yeah, and that goes back to the story I told you about the medical professional, right? Like, the one who destroyed the opportunity was actually the other woman. Like, the man was on board with it. So how much, so here we have to kind of layer a couple things. And it's not complicated. You just have to be systematic in your thinking about it. We have the layer of generalities. Like, we know that exists. We know there's kind of societal expectations built into it. And then we have to layer this onto that, the specific experience that we're dealing with. And in that, you know, you've just mentioned that you're going to be talking with a woman. Do you have other encounters yet with this woman that you can draw upon?
I know from, like, the interactions that she had with the references that she called. So they kind of told me that she seemed enthusiastic. She called fast enough where I didn't even get a chance to, like, tell my references. So, you know, the people I talked to who were my references said that was, like, a good sign. So part of me is going in kind of confident, like, it's not like positions where I've applied for where they're like, well, we have other people to interview. We'll get back to you in 2 weeks. Like, she already, like, seemed enthusiastic about, you know, calling all of my references. So
that's information. And you've spoken with her directly?
Yeah, she sent me an email, and she was the one who called me to schedule, like, an interview to negotiate salary. And I might not, like, get the position. Like, I think she wants to talk even more about it to, like, potentially finalize it. So I don't want to, like, jump on to be like, oh, well, you know, I have it already. But I guess it's more of, like, an offer and to negotiate the expectations for the position as well as the salary.
Okay. So it would be, this kind of is taking us in a different direction, but let's just stop here for a second. It would be unfair to have one conversation for those two topics, because tell me how you could come into a conversation and give her salary information and your expectations without knowing what the job expectations are. That doesn't seem fair to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first thing is you probably need to have those as separate situations, whether it's formal conversations or meetings or whatever. But I just don't, I mean, you all chime in, this is a conversation, but how do you do that in one conversation? How can you actually be informed? And you said that you did some market research, which is great, but, you know, are you going to be the chef and the line leader and the person watching the residents before they go to bed and confirming their hygiene and doing the swim thing, and lifeguarding and whatever, you know what I mean? Like, you need to know a scope, because you might need to take your market research and like multiply it a few times if you're really covering 4 roles.
I've made that mistake, that I took a job and like I read the position, and like I've been told, sort of, but the job was very different than what it was made out to be. And the fact that it was more than it was made out to be. And I've made that mistake before.
Yeah, and then you're kind of stuck, right? Because you've agreed. Yeah. So, and this kind of dovetails into another point, and I promise we'll get back to like the actual, the number situation too, but going back to the job application process, you have to kind of cast your net wide, because there are different ways that jobs get posted. And I don't mean like, did you find it on Indeed or on a poster board in a bathroom? That's not what I mean. What I mean is, who is posting it? How much knowledge do they have about the position? How thoughtful were they about what they put in the position, in the ad itself? So for example, and I was talking with my husband about this the other week, they have, quote, designers, and it's for electrical engineering designers. They have graphic designers apply. So they have like people who do billboards and ad print and stuff like that. They have those people apply to design power grids. So, and the reason is because the power company uses imprecise language. Like they use their own lingo. Like designer to them means something different than designer to the rest of us. So when you are, and it actually works in exactly the inverse way too, where they're going to use language that you may actually be qualified for, but it doesn't necessarily look like that to you. So cast your net wide and start from that place, because again, you might have someone from HR, if it's a big company, HR might be posting the position with all of their language they have to have in there, without any specific language to the position that's actually helpful for you to understand it better. And the reason I think this is kind of important with your situation, Danny, is like what actually is the position. There's some law that may be changing on this, but right now, here, people can ask you what your previous pay has been, how much you want to make, like what your salary requirements are. And it's different when there's information on an application. You know, it kind of feels like obligatory that you need to fill it out. But I think it's actually even worse in person. Like it's harder not to answer that question in person, because you're just sitting right there with them, and you ask, and they ask, and then what do you say?
It was a work study position. It was federal government aid. And then I keep my mouth shut.
Okay, but then they say, and what is your salary requirement or your hourly requirement for this position?
For this one? $12 an hour.
Okay.
So like, would you lie and just say you had a higher salary
I
than
don't know.
they?
I want to see what you all would say first, and then I'll give them a thought.
I'd probably give them the honest answer, but then say that I felt that I deserved more and wouldn't be willing to work for anything higher than whatever.
Well, I mean, if it's the position I'm applying for, it's 12, but like the work study position is 11.25, and I wouldn't lie about that, but I'd give them my work study allotment aid, I think, as opposed to the hourly position.
Okay.
I think I would, if I knew what the ranges were for the salary, for the starting salary, and I knew that the lowest would definitely cover everything that I needed it to cover, I would just give the highest to see where it would go from there.
On the terms of my previous salaries, I'd probably either give the work study answer, or I would give it was a set salary that came with the job, which is what my camp counseling job was. In terms of salary requirements, I would have hopefully done some research on starting salaries for the position, and just personally, I probably would have given about, if I knew what the range was, I probably would have given, I wouldn't have given the highest end, but I probably would have given on the higher end, maybe like 60. on a scale from like 0 to 100, with 0 being the lowest starting salary and 100 being the highest, I'd probably go about a 60, 65.
Okay. Would anyone defer on the answer to what your salary requirements were?
I would.
And why, Brina?
Well, at that point, you don't all necessarily know exactly what they want from you, and you just need some time to figure out, relative to the position, what the market's commanding, even if you've already done your homework. And if you label a number too fast, you've already anchored, and they probably already know how low they can get you for. It just, I would just keep it negotiable.
I 100% agree. And that's as someone who, in a hiring role, I tend to ask the question.
Now, I've never actually done it, though. Previously, I've always just,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I've always just, of course,
yeah.
I go and I hang for a long time, but I've learned a lot since then. So if I were all these people,
Yeah.
now I would try to defer.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to know that I mean, have you always negotiated?
No,
Your
first job I
salary?
did not.
Right. So
No. But,
What if they, what if you try to defer and they go, well, give me a ballpark number?
yeah.
great,
so
great
let's-
point.
Because,
Yes,
I mean,
it
I haven't had that number in terms of salary questions, but I've definitely had that question asked in terms of other aspects of it. I'll say something along the lines of, I'm not totally sure yet about something, and they'll say, well, give me an idea. What's
Yeah.
your best guess?
Yeah.
And I'm
So that's a skillful questioner. But I think it doesn't change the answer that you don't know. And so let's kind of brainstorm for a second at some things that can work. So they ask the question, and say it's just like other questions, like say in your friendships or your roommates or whatever, where they ask a question, you're like, that's a little too personal for me. And we all know people do that, right? But you're just in kind of that formal setting, and it feels like the boundaries are set in a different way, and so that you kind of are compelled to answer these questions. And I would never advocate lying, so I definitely want to be clear about that. But there are some things they're not entitled to, and that's why I said when I made the reference to some laws changing, some states are saying, look, in an interview, you cannot ask what someone has made before or what they require, because it really does put you in a bad bargaining position. It does. For kind of, in part, the reasons we talked about before, right, that gives them an idea of where they can go down from. So, especially if they have not in the ad put a salary range, which I think when you get into positions that move from hourly to salary, I think you'll find that'll be true, that it'll be commensurate with experience. Mm-hmm. That is really vague. And so when your roommate asks you something personal, like, are you going to shower this week? Or it's it's really none of your business. I'll make up my mind, whatever. That's a silly example, but my point is there are things that people ask that are too personal, and that you may not know the answer to. And I'm a huge advocate. If I don't know the answer, I will say I do not know the answer. And so if someone says, what's your salary requirement? I really don't know right now. I'm still gathering information. This interview is an important part of that information gathering process. But I'm sure when we get to that point, then we can have that conversation. Well, what's your range? Like I said, I don't know right now. What's wrong with that same answer?
Well, would that deter them from if they have someone who's willing to work, you know what I mean, if they're interviewing other people and
Mm-hmm.
that person doesn't really know these negotiation skills or doesn't really care and just wants the job,
Mm-hmm.
Would they just pick that person over the other, over you? I guess it depends on
Well,
how well you
maybe, but what if
interview.
you go too high? I did go too high. I've gone too low one time. I've gone too high one time, and you put it down, and then you're automatically off the table because they've decided they can't afford you without even going back and forth.
So you've got some, and this is kind of, again, we're layering here, right? So you've got two people. One person says, I will work for this insanely low amount. And someone says, I don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so they don't know if you're actually below that insanely
Okay.
low amount.
Yeah.
They don't know where you are. Now, someone who is, here's the layer, an organization that's looking to take advantage of you may say, well, if she was savvy enough not to want to tell us that, then she's probably not lower than this insanely low number. And then the layer is, do you want to work there? So, that's, and then that becomes a question of choices. So maybe we can kind of go to that for a quick second.
Yeah, I
Is it-
actually had a really quick question about that.
Yeah.
If you have two job offers on the table, and they're both fairly well matched, it's not going to hurt you or help you to take one or the other, and they're both sort of equal, not like equally interesting, but like, you wouldn't mind working for either of them. How do you like bounce those two offers off of each other to get the best offer?
Okay, so in other words, like try to leverage one
Yeah.
with a, okay, so a couple preliminary thoughts. One is that if you feel like they're relatively equal, I would say do more research, because there's probably still information you can gather that would help you lean toward one or the other. That being said, whether or not they are equal, the other party to the negotiation doesn't know that. So just having another offer is leverage in and of itself. So strip aside the other part of it. So you have you assessed how much need there is? Because if, in other words, it's supply demand. If they have 15 other people they could turn around and give the offer to, and you try to leverage a different offer, then they're like, okay, number 2, number 3, all the way to 15. But assuming that there's some need for you specifically for the position, then make a decision. Most of the time, let's say once you've gotten an offer, a lot of things after that will happen in writing. So that gives you lots of time to craft a really pretty nice correspondence to them. And what I mean by pretty is like thoughtful, and you say the things you need to say in the order that makes sense to say them. And so obviously what you're letting them know is you're really interested in the position. The more you've found out about it, the more pleased you've been about what you found, just some language kind of in that direction. You are torn, however, because you have another offer in a similar industry or another offer with similar appeal. And you can do it a couple ways, and I think then you have to think about your previous interactions with that person or that team, that hiring team. So you can say, I feel like I would, let's step back. What can you do, or is there any flexibility in your opening offer? Because then that opens them up to say, we have none, or we have something. At your age, so here's a layer, again, specific to you, you don't have that much experience, probably for anything you're gonna do. And I don't mean that like in a negative way, that's just life. So I would lean at your age to just starting with that, like opening the conversation. Can you, do you have flexibility? Is there anything additional you can do? Because I think if you were to make an ask, it would just be really hard at your age and experience to make an ask that would be a meaningful difference. I mean, because here's from where I'm sitting. If someone's like, well, I'll give you $12 an hour, and you say, I really need $12.10. That's kind of irritating from where I'm sitting. So I think if you ask the question, now let's say you just say all the same things, and you say, do you have flexibility? And they're like, well, we could probably do $12.10. So you get to the same place, and you walk into the actual job in a much better position. Because let's kind of jump there for a second. That's the downstream problem, is if you don't handle the negotiation well, even if you end up with the job, you come into that job as the witch. So it's not easy, for sure. The words are easy, like getting to the right words with practice is easy, but managing the downstream effects of it can be more challenging.
We're about 7 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, let me go back to Danny's question. So here's something you can look at in terms of how you craft your specific number statement. people will react differently to different presentations of evidence and different asks. So there's this lady named Gretchen Rubin who has created this framework of thinking about how people do it. It's called the 4 tendencies. And there's a quiz online that's really short that you can take, and it will help give you information about how you deal with things. But in essence, what she's saying is, when you deal with people, how will they respond to expectations? So it helps you get some information about how to present what you want so that they will respond the way that you want. So, and she's got 4 categories: upholders, obligers, questioners, and rebels. If you have 0 information about anyone else, like the person that's on the other side, they're most likely an obliger, because most people are. And what that means is it's kind of shorthand for like people pleasers. Like if someone expects it of you, you're probably going to do it. Like you set up external accountability, then they're probably going to do it. So that's, dieting is always like an easy way for me to relate to these 4 tendencies. So that's your Weight Watchers person. They do well because they have to go in, they have to track their food, and they have to weigh in front of somebody. And that is an external expectation that helps them to perform well. So if you're dealing with someone like that, then if you talk about your market research, if any additional information that you can bring into that fold, even if it's a little outside of the camp area, so like look at instructors who will do those things but not residentially. So bring those things in, because that's my guess is that's going to bring your numbers up that you can reference. And so now you've set an expectation based on external things for that person. So that's kind of what you can do with that. If you're dealing with an an upholder, what that means is they do things because they feel it's the right thing to do. They respond well to expectations on the inside and the outside. So they're the people, it really doesn't matter if they use Weight Watchers or not, they're still going to perform the way they want in terms of eating and exercise and all that kind of thing. And there's not a lot you need to do there, because the common area there is that if they know there's an external expectation, they'll meet that. So those kind of fold in. A questioner is someone who you need to explain as thoroughly as you can why you're asking for what you're asking for, so that it becomes what they believe themselves. So your market research is helpful, but if there's additional information that you can add about, for example, not just how much they should pay you, but like if there's research that says that kids who have well-qualified instructors perform better or have repeat customers, like the camp will get these people back because of the reputation of the instructors, then doesn't that, like when you hear, like I saw you nodding, doesn't that start to make you think, oh yeah, that's good for our bottom line long term? Because then you're adding value, because it's not just taking money from them right now, but you are potentially increasing their profit base long term. So that's something that you can do in that. And the 4th one, which I actually think is the most difficult category of people, would be rebels. And they're the people who, if kind of like the name implies, if you say, I think that you should do this, and they'll say, no, just because you said it, now I'm not doing it. And in that sense, what Gretchen Rubin suggests, and I think this is really effective, is you can't talk about facts, you have to talk about identity and values. Like what is important to them. So again, go back to the website of the organization. What do they say is important? And how does having you there and how does paying you more fold into that? Because then you're appealing to what they believe about themselves to be true. Not behaviors, but like their identity and their values. Like you are a camp that values individuals and their contribution to the world, or whatever it is. So that's how I would suggest addressing that, whatever the number is. Yeah. All right. Well, I know Abrina's always really good about time boundaries. So
We have 2 minutes. Anything else? Isabel, you wanna put forth yours?
Which part of it?
The part where you have an opportunity, let me turn this off. Part where you